Welcome to T Simple Podcast. We focus on providing simple solutions in the classroom. I have a DMV sister, is someone that is vibrant, full with energy. She's known as Jennifer, also known as AmenKheti. She is pretty much the CEO, the runner of the company 123 WeRead. She has a children's book for the ages 3 to 5 years old. That is super important. Our kids are coming with so many things, and we give them this book that they're going to read, and they get to see their faces. When they touch those pages, they're touching themselves. It's super explicit, so the kid sees that there's Black culture and education at the same time. She is the example of self-determination. She's going to emphasize and talk about the beauty of literacy, but not only literacy, but Black literacy. How you doing today, Miss Queen?
I'm good. You got the self-determination. We coming right out of Kwanzaa. You hit them with the, what is that, Kuji Shakalia? I love it. I'm with it.
Yeah, absolutely.
Thank you so much. That's a wonderful introduction.
You deserve it. You deserve it. Yeah, absolutely. Thank you so much for fitting your schedule around this. I really
Absolutely.
I really love being in the rooms that you host. You're definitely a leader, I'm sure, in the education field, but you're also a leader, on social media platforms, and people are coming to your rooms and wanting to hear what you and your group have to say.
Clubhouse.
Thank you.
Yeah, on the Clubhouse app.
Yeah.
The first room that I opened on Clubhouse, I think I opened it my first day or maybe my second day.
Hey.
And it was just, I wouldn't say there was a whole lot of confidence. There was confidence there too, right? Because I know what I know, and I know that I have things of value to bring. But more importantly, it was just that lesson that if you don't see what it is you want, you create it. And it doesn't have to be a perfect creation, right? Sometimes you just start and it fixes itself along the way, or other people come in to help you fix it. And so I was scrolling on the app, and I think the room I met you in was the Educational Entrepreneurs Room, which I do every Monday, 6 p.m. Pacific. Quick little plug on the Clubhouse app. And you know what? I was popping into all of these phenomenal entrepreneur rooms, right? Like how I made 10K in 3 hours. It's just like all of these things, right? A lot of tech spaces. And it was cool. I was able to pull some information from it, but didn't quite resonate with me, right? Like I wasn't in the tech field, and I wasn't just selling something, right? This resonated with me on a deeper level, the product that I have. And then some of the other rooms of entrepreneurs I was seeing were, like your Instagram baddies, they selling the lashes and the waist trainers, and that's cool. Them girls is about they grind, they on their paper, like I love it. But again, it was something I was able to pull from, but I wasn't able to fully give myself. And so I thought, you know what? I'm an educational entrepreneur. I'm an entrepreneur who creates around the sector of education. And I don't know if that's like a term yet, but that's what I do. And so I created a room because I figured if I do it, I bet you there's one other person who does it or wants to do it too. And it turns out there's at least hundreds. So that's how that room came to be.
Absolutely. You are a risk taker. You pointed out something really good. Even if it's not perfect, you allow other people to do it. And that's the perfect example of a leader. So you're definitely a leader. So thank you for that.
Thank you. That's something that I've learned from entrepreneurs. They talk about just getting started. Sometimes we let the quest for perfection immobilize us and paralyze us. And you don't just get started because you want this in place and that in place. And I need more lights, and just do it and let it fix itself along the way,
I got my sister Queen. She is a queen. She came through with 1, 2, 3. Read it. We're about to talk about literacy. But before we do that, I want to talk about just teachers real quick. So as teachers, we have Teacher Tip of the Week on Teach Simple Podcast. So I'm going to give a tip, and then I'm going to give you some statistics. But you have experience as educators, so you can give your tip without me giving you statistics anyway. But the one tip that I would give to teachers is to ask for help. Really build that relationship with your coach, your admin. Unfortunately, there's huge dynamics where it's like admin versus teacher, admin versus superintendent, and it's just this infighting, but the kids end up getting the short end of the stick. So really just understand that teaching is an art. You're not always going to be great, but if you aren't great, ask for help, ask for observations, or ask just for feedback, and then apply it. You might get better. What about you? What's some advice would you give to teachers? The way I normally frame it, I'll say, well, we only got 2% of Black males in education. About a quarter of teachers are saying they don't want to return. We got teachers trying to start their retirement a lot early because of COVID. What advice would you give the teachers out there during these times?
During these times? Whew.
Give us
self-care.
A little bit of hope.
We've never really done this before. Some people have taught on Periscope a little bit, but for the most part, we've never done this before. So talk to other parents, talk to other teachers. It's okay to not know what you don't know and to say, I don't know. I think there's a lot of room for people to say, hey, help me figure this out. Like, how do I keep this kid engaged? How do I keep this kid motivated when they're used to the competition of their peers and there's no more peers around, right? How do you keep a 3-year-old on Zoom for 20 minutes? Who has the answers?
I think of Kanye. You don't got the answers, Slave. You don't got the answers.
I think it's okay to not know. It doesn't mean that we don't know anything. It just means that we don't know that particular thing. And if we ask and mix it with prior knowledge, we'll be able to make more progress than we would if we just sat there and pretended to know all the things.
So let's talk about 1, 2, 3. We read. What is that, and what was the motivation behind that?
That's my baby. It's a company that creates specifically early childhood education reading products that are culturally inclusive. So that's the bigger goal. Right now, the first thing that we're doing is starting with a series of sight word books. In a series, there's 3 sets of books, and each set has 6 books in it, and each set corresponds to a certain grade age range. So the first set gets them in pre-K, the second set gets them in kindergarten, and the third set gets them in first grade. And of course, we know there's some leeway with that, because you can have a 6th grader who has some gaps in sight words that may trace back to first grade, and that's okay. So I say kindergarten or I say pre-K through first, but there's a little leeway with that. And so the first set focuses exclusively on children of color, on Black children. The whole series focuses on children of color, but the first series focuses on Black children. And then eventually there's going to be, like in year 2, year 3, there's going to be each series that focuses on a different culture of color. And the idea behind it is that every child from every culture deserves to see themselves when they first begin reading on their own, when they first begin decoding and processing the world through text. That entry point should look like them, or they should at least have the option for it to look like them. And so I created the option. And, I was an educator for a number of years. And after that, I went to grad school, did my master's, both my master's and my bachelor's in African studies, or in Pan-African studies.
Oh,
and then while I was completing my thesis, I was a reading specialist for those 2 years. And so I just went around with one of the leading companies in the country. We went to several different schools. I probably hit like at least 20 different schools in the DMV area over the course of those 2 years. That's where I really learned how to approach reading through like whole word memorization, otherwise known as sight words.
Yeah.
And I knew I wanted to start my own business, and I found this to be the perfect fit between those 3 things: early childhood education, culture, and specifically like literacy.
One thing that happened right when the Emancipation Proclamation was instituted, in Dr. James Anderson's book, Black Educations in the South from 1865 to 1935, he talks about how literally right after slavery, it was the largest acquisition of literacy amongst ex-slaves. So pretty much Black people who were told
about the Reconstruction period.
Excuse me?
Are you talking about Reconstruction?
Yes. Yeah.
Okay,
Yeah.
yeah.
So during that pretty much Reconstruction period before they instituted public education, Black people had already instituted public education in the South because they had the
Absolutely.
right? So they started their own schools. They had their own teachers. They had Sunday school, but they would teach through the Sunday school. They
We were
literally
thriving. We
right,
were thriving
right,
during
self
that.
determination. So why is literacy so important? Why is it important for Black people?
That's a really good question. I would say that literacy is it's a way of decoding the world, right? And literacy has different components to it. It's actually being able to like literally read what's on the page. And then it's also the comprehension piece, and it's also writing, right? So those are the three parts of literacy, and speaking to some degree.
Right.
But with Black folk, we sometimes we like to say, or we like to start our history here in America, but it's just not true. We have a long, long lineage that traces back to a big continent, traces back to Africa. And when you trace it back, I mean, like thousands of years, literacy, writing, reading, comprehension, taking those things, not just with like the hieroglyphics on the walls and in Kemet in Egypt or in some of the other places where you find writing, but like taking our knowledge of the world, decoding it, understanding it, and then putting that into writing. Like the writing is one of the last things that come. You talking about people who were like studying the stars for multiple generations, people who were studying medicine for multiple generations, and talking about it, doing things with it, and then being able to take that knowledge and put into writing. You don't just start writing. You got to have something to write. So there's like hundreds of years that predate any civilization who started to write. So we don't even know how old we are. We don't even know how long we've been doing this. So the answer to the question of why it's important, one thing is just because it's who we are. It's who we are at our best. It's who we are when we're really contributing our unique forms of genius to the world. When we're doing that, we're taking in the information, we're doing stuff with it, and then we're also writing it down. We're also passing it through oral literacy, like oral literature. That's a valid form of literature as well. So for me, the easiest answer to that, the most simple answer is simply because it's who we are. We are scholars as African people.
Man, I got like five other questions I want to ask you, man. Dang. So okay. So for me, I didn't enjoy reading until I learned about other Black intellects that I could connect with. So, for
Yeah,
example, Huey P. Newton. Huey P. Newton
yeah,
was a Black intellect, but he was also just like another brother, living in America that was oppressed. Uh,
right.
George Jackson. George Jackson. I love his writing. The Soledad brothers from San Quentin. His writing was just higher level type of writing. Like I could literally not only appreciate the vocabulary, appreciate the style of writing, but I could also appreciate the struggle enough to just not even look at it as like excuse me, because sometimes we think something that's intellectual is like anti-Black. And I
Mm.
didn't look at it like that because it was super Black, but it was very intellectual.
Yeah, and Black people are intellectual. Like we
Right.
have lots of civilizations that prove, and that predate Europeans. I mean, you know this. We are intellectual. This idea that you're acting white or you're imitating white folks can't be further from the
Farther from the truth.
truth.
And one thing, and I bring up the Black Panthers for a specific reason related to the regular question. The previous question I'm going to ask you about, what's it like being an author and why you decided to do that. But the Black Panthers, they got pretty much, excuse me, it wasn't the guns that scared them. It wasn't the Black Power fist. It wasn't the camaraderie. It was the breakfast programs. It's when they
Oh yeah,
started getting to the kids and
yeah,
teaching them. That's
yeah,
when they were like, we can't have
yeah,
this. And
absolutely.
yeah, yeah,
I mean,
yeah,
yeah, I can agree more. I mean, the free breakfast program, and they had just the free breakfast program. They also had like an ambulance program that
yep,
they were running in the Bay Area. They
yep,
had a number of things that they were doing to mitigate the social violence, really, the social injustices that were inflicted upon our communities. And as a result, what do we have now? Free breakfast in schools, free lunch in schools. The Panthers started that, and they started it because they understood you have to meet the basic needs of people with the ultimate goal not being survival, but how do we let these babies thrive? How do we put them in the school so that they can excel? That's the ultimate goal, is having them excel. So to do that, we have to start the basics. They need food in their belly. And so, yeah, I strongly believe that when you start creating your own solution for something like that, and you start trying to level the playing field for children in school, that means that there's going to be that trickle effect. You're going to start preparing these babies to be better in the businesses that they create, in their critical thinking skills, in their performance in school and in the world. So it's threatening.
Right.
Ultimately, it's threatening to the white power structure economically, intellectually, socially, on every level. Something as simple as making sure that they have food in their belly ultimately can pose a significant threat.
So you said you studied Pan-Africanism.
I did, yeah, I did Africana Studies in undergrad at Cal State Dominguez Hills here in Carson, California. And then I did African Studies at Howard University in Washington, D.C., the Mecca, HU.
What were some professors that you learned from, and what is Pan-Africanism to you, and how does that flood into your writing or your art, like you being an author?
Yeah, at Cal State Dominguez Hills, I entered as a pre-med as a biology major.
Oh, really?
And then I switched my junior year to African studies, to Pan-African studies. And there's a professor in Zimbabwe. He's in Zimbabwe now, but he was in Carson at Dominguez at the time as an adjunct professor. His name is Dr. Munashe Farusa.
Okay.
Dr. Menashe Farusa absolutely changed my life. That man is incredible. And he just helped me along with the things that I was doing on my own to really understand who I am in the bigger context of the world, in the bigger context of Black people. And once I started seeing that, I come from a long history of people who have been just navigating and thriving in the world and really setting the standard in a lot of ways for what excellence is. Once I began to understand that, then everything else started to make sense. I wasn't doing well in school before I switched to African studies or before I started taking those classes. But once I felt like, oh, I've done science before. I meaning like the bigger I, like my ancestors, like this is a space where we know and we're capable. Once I started understanding that I was capable and that I've been capable, I was able to then go back to those classes and feel like I belonged, feel like I was there and I could be there as a Black person. I could sit there with my cornrows or my afro, or whatever it was, and I belonged in that space and in my. And once you do that, it changes everything. It changes your approach to projects, it changes your approach to writing, it changes your approach to research. It literally moves the center towards you and your culture, away from white culture, which dominates the center.
And as an author, how does that Pan-Africanism, does it motivate it? Does it make you want to write more? Does it make you, since I'm sure you're a minority in a, you know, in a field of authorship, you can correct me if I'm wrong. How does, because for example, I say, because I call myself a Pan-African because I believe in the liberation and the solidarity of Black people, not just the United States, but all over. So whenever
Absolutely.
I encounter people from the African diaspora and they, identify themselves as Black, I'm now their biggest supporter because I want
Yeah.
them to, to grow. So I'm
Yeah.
assuming as an author, how does that influence your, I mean, because your book, it has Black children in it, right? That is not to say it's rare, but it's
Oh,
hard to find those books.
you're not gonna, like, it's the only one right now. You're not gonna find another sight word series that has Black children in it. exclusively, right? Like meaning from start to finish, it's only Black children. It's not Black and white. It's not Black children who look interchangeable with white children. It's Black children. Like men's hair is like 4C. So I'm the only one in this space right now. But yeah, the way that it informs it is, it's real simple at the base. It's just, it's healthy. It's starting with who you are. That is the healthy way that humans engage the world. You start with who you are and you move outward. So saying like, hey, I'm creating children that look like me, that look like Deontay, who I taught, who was 4 years old and was getting suspended like he was an adult from school, right? I'm starting with kids who look like me and who represent that. Um, and it's just a really simple concept, but it's providing a point of entry, not just for other Black children, but also for white children and children of other races who need to see little like Shaquisha as fully human. They need to see her as just as capable and just as smart because that's going to impact them later in life in the way that they interact and engage with people of color.
And you're humanizing us because
absolutely we read. That's why we read. Like we read, not we read too, but we read, and we can just stand in that truth without comparison to other people. This is what we do, and we've been doing it.
You taught me so much about Pan-Africanism. Pan-Africanism is like about integrity. I feel like if you are Pan-African, you have to have a deep appreciation for African culture enough to have a deep appreciation for other people's African culture to where you feel the need to bring solidarity amongst each other, right? Because so I think of Kwame Ture, right? I think of H. Rap Brown. I think of Kwame Nkrumah. I think of Steve Biko. I think of Angela Davis. I think of the struggle fighters, people that are in the struggle, freedom fighters. I mean, even the ones that we call quote unquote the not so revolutionary people, John Lewis, Martin Luther King. Just I consider all people Pan-African.
Absolutely.
Right. So yeah, just integrity. And I say that to say like when I was discovering my Afrocentricity, it was not only my psychology that was changing, it was my hair that was changing, it was my food habits that were changing, it was the way I interacted with Black people. Whenever I was around Black people, I will always show love. And one thing about Black people, we're not a monolith, right? We speak different dialects. And if you're lucky enough, you can experience all those cultures and learn those cultures and be able to speak similar and adapt. And so I grew up in New Orleans, then I moved to DMV, then I went to Norfolk, and then I went to Detroit. All those are different Black cultures. All those are different languages, different linguals. And I had to learn those things so I can navigate.
Yeah, you were in very Black spaces.
Yeah, absolutely. But my mother, she was very educated. I grew up in the suburbs though, but I went to an inner city school. And so when kids saw me, they could tell that I was different. Because even though I was Black, I was culturally different from them. And that's one thing we have to understand about when we're teaching. It's about culture, right? It's about you generally caring about that culture enough to be responsible towards it. Because just because you're Black, that doesn't mean that you can teach Black kids.
No, and you said something earlier about integrity, and I think that's a really powerful word because you can have integrity individual to individual, meaning that I do what I say, right? Like that's a form of integrity. And then you can also have integrity on an academic level. And for me, there's this quote, I think it's Dr. John Henrik Clarke, and he said that Black history is simply the missing pages of world history. And to me, that's a quote about integrity, about saying, hey, we need to course correct something here because we're telling a version of the world and of the history of the world. And even as we're writing the present, right, we're telling these stories and forming these narratives that are ahistorical, that aren't true. So infusing, in a way, to me, Pan-Africanism or focusing on my cultural contribution to the space, it's a form of inserting integrity back into those conversations and back into those fields. Does that make sense?
Absolutely. Absolutely. It's intention. You're intentional. You're
Yeah,
like,
and
yeah,
you're
I definitely mess with Black people. Go ahead. I'm
because
sorry.
you're identifying that there's something that's off.
Right.
There's something that's missing. There's something that's not just missing about Black people, but there's something that's aggressively anti-Black in its omission. And so you're saying that, and then you're inserting something that's going to correct it or put the truth, put the integrity back into it.
And that's why your book is so important, because you have the Black girl with the barrettes, right?
Yeah, that's Ada. That's my baby. That's Ada.
And that is important because they're seeing themselves in literature. They're seeing themselves next to Read, and that does so much what you're
Yeah.
talking about.
And I'll show you, I often show the cover, but like the first page, I don't know if you can see it with
Yeah,
the light.
oh, you got the word slight. Oh, yeah, you DMV out the way.
I'm going over the sight words, right? In each book, there's sight words. In this is the first book of the first set, so there's only 2 sight words.
Got it.
And there's some letter sounds that you need to know as well. And with those letter sounds, I'm giving you the corresponding icon that's like very African centered. So for Africa, D for dad, but it's a black dad, right?
Yeah.
And like these are
Oh, wow.
the nose, and it's a broad colored black nose. And so, sometimes we think that white is like the default or that white is standard. But once I started doing Pan African studies and just became really aware of things happening in the world, I realized that a lot of this stuff is intentional. Like, it's not just coincidence that you might see that directory in another book and the dad would be white or the nose would be
Right.
white. Like, that's very, very intentional. And so it stands out even more when you insert the integrity into it and say, no, let's do something different. Let's have a different type of conversation.
So Pan-African, we got integrity, but then ultimately we have integrity because we want to be truth seekers.
Yeah.
To speak truth to power. And I think if
And
you're
put
on a
truth
line
back
of
into
truth,
the world, that principle of restoring the balance. And the missing balance is just truth. Just speak the truth about things and about people and about what the world is. And that's going to help to restore that balance.
I love it. I love it. How you doing? How you feeling?
I feel good. I'm really excited. I'm really enjoying this.
Good. I want you to enjoy
I
it.
love that you created this platform so that you can speak on things that are important.
Yeah.
I really appreciate you for this.
Of course, of course, of course. So I got a couple more questions, and then we're gonna end on what do you want to get from this? What do you want people to get from this podcast? But I first want to talk about your experience at an African-centered school, and then all right. So let's do this then. Could you maybe read like an excerpt from the book and just talk about the thought process behind it?
Yeah, of course. So this is WeRead, and this is a series of sight word books. In the series, there's 3 sets of sight word books. Each set has 6 books in it, and this is the first book from the first set. So this is very, very entry level. A 2 or 3-year-old, depending on where they are with their sight words, is going to be able to start the reading process with it. So it's just very simple. The first one is just the girl's name. It's Ada. And one thing that I wanted to do with the names, I wanted to have names that read the same front to back.
Okay.
And that's just for to have different points of entry for children who may be learning reading, and we may still be discovering how they read. They may be neurodiverse. They may see things in a different order. So I wanted them to still be able to navigate her name. So her name is Ada, and the first one says "Si Ada."
Mm-hmm.
This is just the introductory one.
Yeah, keep going. This is great.
So there's a lot of repetition throughout it. And then Nin. Nin is the same way. It reads the same front to back.
Mm.
And something that was important to me was like Also the dress, like you said, Black folk aren't a monolith, but you know, I grew up in Compton, I grew up in the hood, and I've lived in cities. And so I wanted like that Black boy in DC who might wear a jersey and some Jordans. I want him to know that he is a place here too. You don't have to look a certain way. You know, you don't have to dress a certain way that's socially acceptable in order to demonstrate how brilliant you are.
And his hair.
His hair, yeah. His hair is real
Those twisters.
yeah. Can you see?
Yeah, I can see it. Are those cornrows or little baby twists?
It's like little baby twist.
Okay, all right, bet.
You know, I wanted his hair to just be nappy. Like I wanted it to be nappy. I know that word has a negative connotation with it. But that high texture, that defiance of gravity, like that, it's beautiful. And so I wanted to really show that. I was seeing children in books that had a skin tone, maybe a skin tone like mine, but everything else was almost interchangeable with like a white girl. And that just didn't work for me. So I wanted to capture the textures and the tones and like the creativity and the vibrancy of Black people.
Yeah, absolutely.
See Ada, see Nen, and you have them together. And we talked about like African centeredness. And for me, one thing I learned when I started shifting my perspective to be centered in African culture was the idea of balance, and that you approach things from a balanced state. And balance is it's masculine and feminine energy, right? Together, existing together. And so that was really important for me in this book, like, and in every book, you're gonna see both a boy and a girl. And that's just important for me to show that boys are reading, girls are reading, we exist together and we support each other, and that's how we move through the world at our best.
Absolutely. What was the strategy behind making this book? Like, did you? I mean, you're talking about the strategy, but maybe just be more, elaborate more about it. Like, elaborate just the.
No, that's a really good question. So there's a lot that's in this book. For one, the size of it, it's small, right? It's not a typical size book. And the dimensions are that way for little hands. I want little people to be able to grasp it and know that this is theirs, right? The texture of it, the cover is harder. I wanted it to be durable. For kids, we know that, especially children of color, are very dynamic and are often able to do multiple things at once. And so I wanted the book to be able to physically withstand their multitasking at times. They may be, you know, whatever it is, drinking and reading, whatever it is.
Right.
That was some of the intention that went into it. Another thing, like I told you, is the names. All of the names in the book are able to be read frontwards, front and backwards. So ADA, whichever way your eyes approach it 1st, you're able to still read that word. And that's important for my time as a reading specialist when I saw that some children, they're still learning. So they may start from a different end of the word, and that's okay. Or they may see things differently out of order, and that's okay too. Another thing that's in this book is all of the sight words. I use sight words that go according to the Dolch, DOLCH.
Wait, repeat that one more time. The Dolch?
The Dolch sight word list.
Okay.
And that's a list of words, and it goes according to age grade. And it just hits that high frequency words that your child is going to see at each grade level. And they're not only high frequency, but the thing about sight words is you're not sounding them out. You're just memorizing them as a whole word. And the reason for that is that often sight words don't play by typical phonetic rules. So when a 3-year-old is learning the E sound, they're going to learn it as eh. They're not going to know yet that 2 E's together make the long E sound. And they don't need to know it yet. They'll learn that later, like around 1st grade. But right now, they're going to see the word so much that they can literally just memorize it on sight. And so I use sight words that are from the Dolch sight word list. So like I said, each set, you'll be able to say, hey, my child is 2 or 3. They'll start with the first set. And then each book in each set gets progressively um, a little bit more complex.
Rigor.
So the first one might be something you do like your first couple of weeks of kindergarten. By the time you get to the end of the first set, it's gonna take you towards words that will prep you for first grade. I know that's a lot of information,
Oh, this is amazing.
but there's a lot of stuff just in here that parents won't know and they don't need to know. It's a great tool for your children, but as someone who is an educator and who was a reading specialist, you'll be able to pull out some of the more layers of information that are contained in it.
What other DMV influences do you have in that book, if there are any? I'm just curious.
DMV?
Because excuse me, you grew up in
Did you say
Compton,
DMV?
but yeah,
Okay.
yeah, you grew up in Compton. So are there any any things that you
I
take?
think DMV too. I just didn't hear you.
Yeah. So like, is there any other? Because you showed me the kid with the dress and excuse me.
Yeah. No, I would say it's just more like hood universal. Like it's just is more of my experience through the different cities I've lived in
Love it.
and the different places different places I've been. And like you said, you're not gonna represent every child everywhere of color, but it's just to kind of give a snapshot that we don't typically see. And when we see it, we don't typically associate it with scholarship. We associate boys who look like this with give him a football or,
Right.
stay away from him or clutch your purse. So I just wanted to shift that a little bit because in my experience, that's not the case. Like Deontay is just as brilliant, if not more brilliant than someone else.
So let's get into as we close. So where does this go from now? So you at this stage, what's the vision?
Yeah, so these are going to market. The first set of the series is going to market in spring of 2021. So we're just a couple of months away from launch. And you can, yes. And you can sign up on the website at 123weread.com for more information and to also keep updated with the emails for as we get closer to launch. We'll probably start with a pre-sale. And so that's going to be exclusive to the people who have signed up on the website. And then also you can find me on all social media platforms from Facebook to Instagram to Clubhouse and coming soon on Twitter at 123weread. That's 123weread. And so the vision for this is pretty big. The first vision is just to get out the first series, which I said is just exclusively featuring Black children. But each version of the series is going to focus on a different group of color, right? So all of it's about children of color. The first one is on Black children. Another one will be on Latinx children. Another one will be on different children from other like ethnic minority backgrounds. So that's the big vision, like for years from now. That's the ultimate vision, is to release a series where each child learning English, whether they're just starting or whether they're coming in as an ESL student, where they have a point of entry for it. And then I've also created a whole host of products that supplement reading. Like I have a pointer. Some children, when they read, it helps them to have a little pointer or something they can follow along with. So having like branded ones or ones where there's a Black finger that's pointing are things that are just culturally inclusive. That's where I'm going with it.
Where'd you get the idea to do that?
That's a good thing. I really feel like this is my life's work. I feel like this is my life's purpose. And so, it's inside of me. Spirit, you can say it came from different places, but it definitely merges the experience and the knowledge that I have. So yeah, I have a lot of visions. I've just sometimes, you get obsessed. You wake up in the middle of the night and just have all these ideas streaming from you.
Absolutely. So as we close, what do you want people to get from this interview and 123 reread? What's one thing that you want them to get from this interview?
I want them to know we're coming. Options are coming. I've spoken to educators who, especially now that they're virtual, it's already hard to find early education materials that feature children of color, particularly in literacy. Like we have the books that you read to kids, you know, storybooks that you read to them when they're young. We have books that they can read on their own when they're starting to be like maybe kindergarten, first grade to some degree. But that entry point of sight word books, see Jane run, run Jane run, we don't have that yet. And so I want educators of every background to know that something's coming that's going to give you another option. And we know, particularly with the current socio-political climate, it's really important to be culturally inclusive. It's really important to support people of all cultures to be able to do their best in this space. And it's really, really, really important that the dominant culture, that white children especially, are able to see their own humanity and then be able to see the humanity in others.
And where can they find the book? And where can they find the book?
They're going to be able to find the book on 123weread.com. When it first launches, you'll also be able to access it through my social media platforms when it first launches. And then after some time, it will be available, you know, more widely on Amazon. But we're not launching on Amazon. We're just launching through our platforms first.
If you don't mind me asking, why is that?
Well, there's a few reasons. The pragmatic one is simply like cost. The cost that it takes to do Amazon and all of the supportive services that you need to be successful. It's in my best interest to test the market first to make sure that people see this. I can make any tweaks that are necessary to other versions before I, you know, go spending the whole inheritance on getting it out there to people.
Beautiful, beautiful, beautiful.
But we'll see. I'm also interested in any angel investors who are interested. So I'm open to launching more. But right now, you know, you just start with what you have.
And that's the simplicity, y'all. It's a T Simple podcast. I got my sister Queen coming from the West Coast. Now she was in DC writing books, being a...
It's actually backwards. I was in DC, now I'm back on the West Coast.
All right, okay. Oh, so, okay, but you started in the West Coast, though.
Started West Coast, went to...
Yeah, so you started
in the West Coast.
DC, now she's back in that beautiful weather. She got to deal with those earthquakes, but she loves it. I love everything that you're saying. You are a creator. Your name should be like, you know, it's like Tyler the Creator. It should be like Queen the Creator, because you are just literally, what you showed me, the specifics of that book, just from the everything, I love it. And one thing about teaching Black kids, we have to dig deep, because like you said, there are systems in place that are purposely, intentionally trying to make sure that we're not liberated. And
they come for our babies. They come for our babies in very subliminal ways, but in very consistent ways.
But they won't do it because I got my sister Queen, the Creator, here coming through with the 1, 2, 3 read. Again, where can they find your book, or when does it come out?
Yes, so this is the first set in the series. The first set is coming out in spring of 2021. Be able to order these, and you can order them at www.123weread.com or across all social media platforms, Instagram, Facebook, Clubhouse, and coming soon to Twitter at 123weread.
Don't mess it up, y'all. Really easy, super simple. www.123weread. Thank you all so much. The T Simple podcast. We about to get it. Got a lot coming from my sister Queen. Peace
Yes,
out.
yes. Thank you so much, Pat.